In one of our 5 stores where role-playing games and TCGs are played, a one-shot was offered on its official Discord server with level 3 characters and 1 common magic item. I actually still had a level 3 Vulpine Blood Hunter left, which I always played in another one-shot. It's a dungeon master who offers one hero guild one-shot every 3 months. So the characters usually all know each other. The Dungeon Master also knew me from the mentioned Hero Guild and agreed to my Blood Hunter, despite the fact that he already had a magic 1+ longsword, which has space for some magic crystals. I also took a muscle amulet as a common magic item. At the beginning, the story was relatively harmless. It was more like a guild mission, only with a different Dungeon Master this time. We were supposed to go to a count who was making a party for his marrying daughter and protect him, basically acting as his bodyguards. The group was as follows: Vulpine Lycanthrope Blood Hunter, me. Goliath Berserker Barbarian, Asamar Life Cleric, High Elf Champion Fighter. What I didn't know, the DM didn't check beforehand to see if there were any beginners in the group, and didn't make it clear how experienced the players should be. I was the only veteran among 3 beginners. Normally, that's not a problem for me. I've often played with beginners and DM'd games for beginners, but the real problems were 1, the plot itself, which I didn't like, and you'll find out why in a moment. 2, stupid decisions the group made. On the way, we found a goblin camp, but somehow everyone wanted to ignore it, and I thought to myself, we are 4 level 3 characters, and I myself play a very strong class. They're just goblins. In my opinion, I treat TTRPGs kind of like an open world. Just because something's there doesn't mean it needs to be explored, and if there's something plot relevant in that area, I'm sure the DM would kind of guide them that way somehow. I know people don't like railroading, sometimes it's necessary. The butler then took us to the Count, and the plot twist, Count is already dead. He died of a heart attack. The actual plot was supposed to be this: we were to pretend that the Count was still alive. Basically, the perfect plot for a changeling. I was pretty disappointed because I was hoping for an attack so that we would have to protect the Count, because a blood hunter is designed for combat and a bit of alchemy. In general, we had 3 classes focused on fighting and 1 healer who couldn't use Revivify at 3. At first, we tried to wake up the Count before we found out he was dead, whether it was by splashing water on his face, slapping him, or shaking him. There were quite a few possible solutions, but it felt like everyone was just looking at me. Stupid idea was simply a move from the cartoon drawn together. As a blood hunter, I was supposed to skin him and then peel off his skin, which sounded like a radical solution, but also didn't make any sense because I am a Vulpine and not a human. For context, in Drawn Together, one of the characters ends up wearing someone as a skin suit. Anyway, spells like command, etc. forced my character to do it. I explained that this wasn't possible because the command spell can only contain 1 word, although some dungeon masters are willing to turn a blind eye and allow 2 or 3 words, especially since German is a rather complicated language. Besides, that is the needed spell for that: dominate person. In the end, it somehow worked out, because DM said so, but I wasn't too thrilled about it, and my blood hunter was forced to skin him, causing the butler who came in to faint, which distracted my character so much that I had to make a dex save, which for Vulpine is dex plus intelligence and possibly proficiency bonus. Nat 1. I cut off half his face. The Goliath then had the brilliant idea of shaking the butler awake. The Goliath. Strength roll. Nat 20. Butler dead. Long story short, the plan went wrong. The daughter recognized me and we had to kill 4 guards and then run away. And to top it all off, the characters blamed my character for their crimes. At the end of the story, my character was arrested in a pub because that damn daughter remembered my blood hunter's face, but I was able to escape with a stealth roll of 19 and now my blood hunter has to live in fear because of such a stupid one-shot. I talked to the old guild dungeon master and we agreed that the whole thing is non-canon. But I think even if the story had gone normally, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I just want to fight, and this plot was just too boring for me. What did I learn from this? Better to ask beforehand what kind of players are involved if they are already known, because too much went wrong and was played out incorrectly. See command spell. My party recently switched from D&D 5e, Pathfinder 2e, and it was decided that I'd be GM for this campaign. It's been nice. We all like the new system, but it hasn't been without its challenges. I haven't GM'd in a while, so in a way I'm knocking the dust off my boots, which is at times challenging while learning a new system I've not played before. My players are blameless. I am the horror story here. As most here know, encounters in D&D 5e can be a lot looser than in Pathfinder. You just sort of get a sense for things, can play it a little loose, and if you make the monster too tough, it really isn't a problem. Action economy in 5e is so important that 3 weaker PCs can easily overcome a single stronger opponent. And there's always the pervading sense that, yes, the book says this, but they haven't met my players. Every time I've thrown something strong or goofy at my party, it hasn't been a problem. They've made it through with HP and spell slots to spare. I didn't know that the Pathfinder 2e encounter math actually worked. A lot happened in session 1 with the story and the evil cult they're opposing, but one of the sillier things that happened was that the wizard tower of Hezekiah the Great Mage blew up due to his inability to properly maintain certain OSHA violating wards after being depowered by a curse. As a result, many of his animal experiments escaped confinement. I wanted this to have recurring consequences. Every once in a while going forward, I planned for the party to fight a miniature griffin or some other sort of changed monster or animal. I have them level up after session 1, as it's our way. So in prep for our next session, I start thinking of what to do with my newly level 2 PCs. Pull up an encounter calculator and see that for 3 level 2 PCs, a lone gorilla is actually a level appropriate moderate difficulty encounter. Sure, I say bold and foolish, but they don't know my players. They can get out of anything. So I make it an elite gorilla, which still puts it below a severe encounter, per the math. But then I think, this thing just escaped a wizard's tower? Wouldn't it be funny if it got tangled up in some kind of magic item? Wouldn't it? Q session 2. The party elects not to rest after the end of their big fight in a tomb last session, so they start down some slots. I think this is a bad idea, so have them hear something big and mean stomping around outside. Can I roll to see if I recognize the sound? Asks Chloe, party witch, and my partner. Cool, secret recall knowledge. Nature roll. It's a gorilla, and it sounds like a really tough one. I say, praying they rest. I poke my head out, can I see it? Secret seek check? Nope. Now Iverson, cleric, is saying it would be so funny if there was just like an invisible gorilla. So they leave, intent on getting the hell out of Dodge and continuing on their quest. There's a guard giving them guff, harassing them a bit for trying to get past his gate. They argue back and forth a little bit, and then the guard turns into a fine pink mist. More strawberry jam than man. And ripping off a cloak of invisibility that had gotten tangled on its head is an enormous silverback gorilla. The gorilla begins chewing the cloak and beating its chest. The party finds this very funny, and Iverson is in a state of disbelief that I actually planned this. The gorilla runs up, puts on a frightening display, they fail, and turns invisible. The observant among you will note that this should count as 4 actions, because frightening display is an activity. Barry the Barbarian, and by far the party member who has read the system the most, deduces frightening display must be some kind of buffed demoralize, and be 1 action. 1 action to move, 1 to FD, 1 to turn invisible. Now, my theory was that turning invisible wouldn't be an action. This gorilla doesn't have a plan, it's a gorilla. It's eaten a magic item, and at the end of each of its turns, it'll become invisible or visible. Our 5e games have always worked with goofy shit like that, but Barry's first turn is wasted searching for a shockingly stealthy gorilla. Then Chloe's and Iverson's. The gorilla pops back in and actually starts fighting the party, wreaking havoc. Despite all this, the combat initially goes promisingly. Barry gets the beast in a headlock, Crit succeeding on a grapple so it's restrained, and Iverson focuses on healing and Chloe on buffs and chip damage with her hex powers. Then the gorilla escapes. As it turns out, unlike D&D 5e, the action economy in Pathfinder 2e is actually pretty well optimized for a single baddie to be a threat without minions, especially if they have high to hit bonus. I thought it'd be a simple case of a 3v1 curb stomp on a powerful but ultimately outmatched beast. Instead, just a few later, Barry is wounded too and playing tag with the floor. Iverson is out of heals and slots completely and is resorting to just hacking at the damn thing with his scimitar, rolling mostly 4s. And Chloe is the only one managing to keep up a string of chip damage via Needle of Vengeance, protecting Barry, though this shockingly willful gorilla keeps saving every time. No one's having a bad time, it's still fun, but no one expected this to be a fight for their lives. What was supposed to be quick combat against a silly foe is turning into a grueling, hours-long encounter. Honestly, it feels surreal because this monkey won't fucking die. Everyone is down to single-digit hit points. The least visible gorilla you ever haven't seen is still rocking with 15. Every time Barry or Iverson goes down, someone has to waste most of their turn moving to and healing them. With the amount of turns they've spent popping back up, it's growing increasingly difficult to justify this silverback not spending the actions to kill one of them once they're downed. My strategy to delay their untimely deaths on a meaningless encounter is backfiring. Because Frightening Display isn't some time waster ability, its debuffs are actually devastating to their ability to hit it. Iverson is yelling at me that if I don't murder him with an invisible gorilla, then I'm a cheat and a coward. Affectionately, but also very earnestly. The call is made. I steel myself to finish someone off if they go down this turn. Barry at 2 HP swings twice from his back and misses both times. Can't do anything else because he was just picked up from dying and had to pick up his club, Big Bone. At least in the process of getting downed, Needle of Vengeance did some damage. Iverson, maybe 5 HP, actually hits for the first attack, dealing 6 damage, but is frightened 1 and misses his follow-up attacks. Down to the witch, who thankfully crit saved before one of the frightening displays, as she was immune to the rest. Chloe's telekinetic projectile actually hits, but she needs an 8 to put this monkey in the dirt, and if she fails, it's ape time. She rolls exactly 8. Much rejoicing is had, but we honestly spend the rest of the session emotionally recovering from the gorilla fight from hell. Also, in getting level appropriate gear, which they didn't have, because I'm an idiot who didn't realize you're supposed to be getting minor magic items early. I promise, I've learned my lesson. Well, to start this story, you need a little context. In the country where I grew up, it wasn't very common to know about Dungeons & Dragons, unless it was on television where they'd mentioned it in cartoons or something. Later, in high school, I discovered the web show Critical Role, and was left with a strong desire to really dive into the game. The problem was finding a group. Searching online, I got lucky and found a local spot where it was very common to play, a board game store. They were very kind and taught me how the game worked through one-shots. I was looking to join a campaign, but the problem was that I lived far away and they were in the city, making it very difficult for me to go often. One day, one of the owners of the store contacted me on Facebook. Yes, this was several years ago. He told me there was a DM who lived near my area and was looking for people to form a group of players for a campaign. He said he He said the DM was a regular customer of the store and seemed to have a good vibe. Oh god, how wrong he was. The DM, who we will call Gary Stew, gave me his contact info. He invited me to play a one-shot with the other people he had met. I said yes, and since I live nearby, I wasn't too worried. I won't bore you with the details. The one-shot was pretty normal. Us versus some bandits. I met who would probably be the group: 3 guys, fighter, rogue, cleric, and 1 girl, warlock, and me, your eloquent narrator, druid. After the one-shot, Gary Stew said he liked the way we played and our style. He invited us to play his campaign, and we excitedly said yes, since, strangely, all the players were newbies who had never played a D&D campaign beyond one-shots. At the time, we didn't question why. We were just happy to be in a real campaign of the game. He told us the campaign was a combination of genres: sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and lots of video game references, especially Dark Souls, because it could get difficult. But he said we didn't have to worry because he not only accepted official material, but he also allowed all kinds of homebrew, spells, weapons, etc. We were just starting out and didn't know much, but we said that was fine. We were also happy that he let us use the characters we used for the one-shot, since we had liked how we developed them in the game. A week passed until the first game began. We were very excited. Warlock even drew pictures of our characters, and we each kept one. We started at level 1, of course, and when the story began, everything seemed normal. The story started after our one-shot, when we defeated the bandits. The portal opened and transported us all to a version of our world, the real world. The characters appeared in a field near a large city. My character tested if his magic still worked there, and sure enough, it did. At the time I thought, cool, so it will be something like our magic characters facing the mundane, or something like that. Not even 5 minutes passed when suddenly the entire city was destroyed before our eyes. A total cataclysm. That's when he made us make our first dice rolls. Rogue was first, but when he grabbed his d20, Gary Stew stopped him. "You don't use that for this," he said, and handed him a d100. Rogue was confused. He asked how he added his skill points to that. Gary just said he couldn't add that, and his character wasn't ready to use his abilities. Everyone at the table was baffled. You see, in the rules of his world, everything had to be learned again. Even though we already had those skills in the past world, we couldn't just use them in this one because, in his words, you don't know the rules of this place. That D100 became a hassle at our table. We had to use it for everything, even to cast spells. If we rolled less than a 50, the casting or ability would fail, leaving us looking like idiots when we needed to do even the most basic things like starting a car. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, we barely survived the cataclysm. We got lucky with a few spells and were able to get out alive. Night fell and we didn't find any survivors. We decided to camp in some ruins when we saw someone approaching in the distance. None of us passed the damn D100 for perception because of course we had to use it for that too. By the time we noticed what it was too late, and it was right in front of us. A zombie. When the battle started, we thought it wouldn't be so bad. Just another undead, and we had a cleric. That creature almost killed us. Even though our initiatives were high, all our attacks missed. It regenerated from sword attacks, daggers wouldn't penetrate it, fire spells made it grow bigger, and when the cleric cast Sacred Flame, he mocked us. When it was the zombie's turn, Gary Stew gave it 10 actions, saying that it was fair since there are more of you than him. The zombie hit all the attacks, curiously leaving all of us at 1 HP. We were already planning our escape strategy when suddenly, and in the DM's own words, from the shadow of perdition, a ray of hope emerges from the rubble. In what appears to be radiant armor with a soulless symbol mounted on a golden motorcycle arrives a mysterious stranger. That mysterious stranger started performing a series of crazy stunts until he reached the zombie. with a single slash cut off its head. Strangely, Gary didn't make any dice rolls to check if everything he was doing went well. It just happened. When it was over, he took off his golden helmet, revealing a face with many scars, which again, in the DM's words, did not deform his face, but rather beautified it. Then he spoke his first sentence. "It is foolish to face a beast like that." He had that arrogant tone that instantly made me dislike him. He gave us the strange explanation that those types of creatures cannot be defeated so easily, not even by what we call magic, even if it comes from a false god, he said while looking at the cleric with fury. He practically humiliated us for not knowing what we were doing in our first battle in that world, even when we told him we weren't from there. He kept belittling us for not investigating anything about that place when we arrived. I must also mention that the DM gave the character a tone of voice as if he thought he was an anime protagonist. Despite his attitude, we wanted to be friendly. We asked him his name, and I'm not kidding, he introduced himself as, "I am Gary Stewman." It was an obvious variation of Gary's name. At the time, it didn't bother us much, since we were all just starting out. We didn't know about self-insert DMs and how toxic they were. If we had, we might have gotten up from the table right there and then. We should have, knowing what came next. I'm going to summarize the following sessions a bit, but for the next 3 months, they were the most stressful games of my life. We had the idea that if we just kept playing, things would slowly get easier, but we could never do anything right. For every skill check, we could only use the D100, and failure was almost guaranteed. We were always on the verge of death. Every monster had like 1000 HP, and only Gary Stewman could kill them. We couldn't level up because Gary said, "You haven't learned enough," and he was never specific about the details of how to learn things. Every NPC we met looked down on us, treating us like children for not knowing things about that world, and they all had those anime character tones, plus they all called us fools, as if the people of that place didn't know any other insult. Things started to affect us internally. Fighter and Rogue had a strong argument because the missions never went well. They blamed each other. Gary Stewman tried to have a relationship with Warlock in the game, but when the player said she was a lesbian and that her character was too, mysteriously, all the female NPCs started treating her badly. Gary's justification was that because she used that strange magic, they didn't trust her. We literally had to sit through a 40-minute scene of Gary Stewman defending Warlock, fighting alone against a group of people who wanted to burn her as a witch, and then giving a speech where he made them see reason, while we couldn't participate because we had to protect her in a building. 40 minutes of watching Gary Stew talk to himself. Every idea we had to do something, his self-insert responded with a laugh and a bad joke, saying it would go wrong, and if we tried it, the failures would end up with some kind of humiliation for our character. He made my character smell like an unwashed dog and wet himself, just because I wanted to talk to a dog, saying I had to feel like one to do it. Things got tense. Coming to play felt more like an obligation. If we told the DM we couldn't make it for a reason, he made us feel like we would lose a big part of the story, and that our progress to the next level would be delayed even further. Those 3 months felt eternal, even though we only met to play once a week. I know at this point you'll say, why didn't you leave his campaign and look for another one? You have to understand that it was practically our first campaign, and at that time, it wasn't easy for someone in my area to find a nearby place for D&D. Plus, the DM had already made us feel like we were the problem and not his toxic game. Everything changed one day when the owner of the board game store contacted me again. There was a campaign available that could be played over Discord. I was a bit disillusioned with the game, but he had been very kind to think of me, and I said I would try it out. Skipping ahead a bit, the game was amazing. I felt that excitement again, the reason why I had gotten into the game in the first place. I felt like my character was useful, and I could finally roll a d20 again. You don't know how happy that made me. Curiously, Fighter and Warlock were also players in that game, and unlike the other game, we got along great in this one. We flowed as a team, and if something went wrong, we didn't blame each other because we had the opportunity to fix it. After the game, we stayed on the call talking about how different this experience felt. With all this in mind, we understood that we were not the problem, but Gary Stew was. And I know that at that point, the most rational thing would have been to simply stop going to his game, but we were angry. Very angry. We wanted to teach Gary a lesson. Nothing illegal, of course. He had made us feel so useless and belittled in our first D&D campaign that we wanted him to feel some of the discontent we had felt during all of those hours of play. We made a secret chat that also included Rogue and Cleric, and we developed a plan. When we had everything ready, we convinced Gary to hold the game at Cleric's house. He agreed. When the game started, everything seemed normal. Gary Stewman and his arrogant comments, and us feeling bad. Everything would change with the first roll. Perfect 100, said Rogue. Gary was surprised. I leaned over to look at the die, and even though it said 25, I said yes, perfect 100. The DM had no choice but to make his action a success. Soon came the fighter's action, perfect 100. Cleric, 100. Warlock, 100. Me too, a perfect 100. Gary obviously suspected something and said, guys, I don't think you rolled that well. Even with a 100, you can't hit the monster. That's when Warlock replied, in fact, it's the opposite. At this point, I grabbed Gary Stewman's battle axe and decapitated him with a single swipe. We all started saying, yes, that's right, that happened. And also that we reached level 20 just because of this fact. Gary got upset. Hey, that didn't happen. In fact, he wouldn't let you take the axe just like that. Fighter replied, that's why I slapped it out of his hand. Look at him lying on the floor. I think he wants to cry. Gary tried to speak, but that's not... I said, he even wet his pants. Look, he made a puddle. Everyone at the table started adding more and more things. The monsters turned into chickens, the NPCs dance in circles while crying, Gary Stewman won't stop sucking his thumb. Gary Stew, completely annoyed, just said, a meteor arrives and destroys you all. Warlock, in a quick response, said, we use Gary Stewman's body against the meteor, saving the planet but ending him forever. Gary, without saying anything else, grabbed his things and left. We didn't say anything as he was leaving, we just smiled. For the rest of the evening, we ordered pizza and watched a movie, and of course, we talked about how good what we did felt, at least at the moment. Time passed. Warlock and I played in a couple more games, but I haven't played a campaign with that group again. I'm still playing and must say that luckily in no other campaign have I encountered a similar experience. As for Gary Stew, I didn't hear much about him. Talking to the store owner, he told me that Gary came back a couple of times looking for a new group, but after a while he stopped. He received many complaints from players about his attitude. Well, this is my story. With a bit of clarity over the years, I see that the attitude we took back then wasn't the best, and if I could go back, maybe I would try to talk to him. I remember everything his game made me feel, and I don't know. I don't wish him ill, but I certainly couldn't play with someone like him again. This is actually a series of horror stories. At the time of this game, I'd been a forever DM for around a decade. I tried many systems, but always as the DM. Mid-campaign, I was experiencing some burnout. We decided to run separate campaigns with different DMs. I was ecstatic that they were up for it. Our party was made up of Ranger, 22, fairly cool guy, had a crush on Druid, 21, shy player, stuck to Ranger like glue, Paladin, 22, power gamer, team player, but was violent with other PCs at times to get his way. Rogue, 23, chaotic, liked stealing things, professional rage baiter, and then me, an Eldritch Knight, 22. I wanted the games to work out, so I guess team player. So the first person to try their hand at DM was Paladin. He's played versions dating back to 2nd edition with his dad, so we were all excited for him to take over. We start the game in the employ of a local lord, heading an expedition sent to a town in a remote valley that mines a rare ore. Our mission is to restore the flow of rare ore to the kingdom. He decided to start us out at level 3 with an extra 3k gold to spend and an additional feat using point buy. We all did our thing, then set into the town with around 100 NPC followers. I was pretty excited at this point, but it was kind of downhill from there. The town mayor comes out to greet us and states an army of orcs and monsters overran the mines, and that we need to uproot them to re-establish the flow of metals. He then tells us as DM that we might not have another attempt to spend gold for some time, so we should buy material for a dungeon crawl. We do so, stocking up on supplies, then head out with our army. We arrive at the mine and encounter an army of orcs. We try for diplomacy, but the diplomat gets struck down by an arrow from above by a menacing orc on a manticore. Cue a massive battle that goes on for 6 hours. 6 hours of straight combat. He played it out like a 40k game where little time was spent on the players and it was mostly archers trading volleys and shield walls clashing. We all got a few cool moments. Druid healed a bunch of soldiers, ranger and rogue played cat and mouse with the warlord, and I fought elite orcs on the line. It was just a long grind for so early in a game. In hindsight, I think he should have narrated the army parts or let us control the units. Orc Warlord and army flees back into the mine once his manticore is wounded, and we decide to take a long rest outside the mine. Our long rest is interrupted at every turn. Soldiers dragged away in the night by goblin warg riders, shot with arrows or burned in their tents. We figure that's fair, and decide even low on resources, we need to assault the mine, but we ended the first session there. We agreed we wanted more RP, but overall the party was somewhat content. Next session, the DM awards us with a short rest, and we push inside, only to find traps everywhere. Spike traps, wire traps, stone blockades, trap doors that flood rooms. It was like attacking a castle built by kobolds. Worse, we couldn't siege it because the goblins had tunnels above it in the ice to ferry supplies from caves to surface and vice versa, so we had to push inside. Soldiers began to die in droves. Still we fought, and before we knew it, we'd cleared around 20 rooms, lost nearly all our men to wargs and goblin swarms, and the session was over. Hours of fighting after waiting days for a session. Some of us disliked the constant fighting and traps, especially with no rewards, but Paladin encouraged us on, so we went, though some silent agreements were made to depose Paladin if this kept up. Session 3 rolls around and we go straight back into the grind. By this point, we'd worked out a good system of combat. Rogue leads looking for traps, then when combat begins, I lead tank with Rogue doing damage, Ranger shooting or plugging goblin holes, and Druid being our clutch healer. We start clearing rooms quickly without our soldiers, most of whom are dead. We eventually leave them behind and press on alone. More combat, more rooms. This infinite mine never seems to end, and another session ends with us holding up in a room we found with an iron grate for a short rest while we hope the soldiers buy us time on their way out. Paladin/DM rewards me and only me by having us find an angelic sword in the mine. Apparently it used to be a temple. The others are jealous of my magic item and sick of constant fighting, especially Rogue. Rogue says he's done and wants to run his game. When I talk him into trying another session, the session ends with us hearing the sounds of battle and death echoing through the mine. Session 4. All our soldiers are dead, and we're alone in the mines. The monsters have started retrapping our path in because they think we're gone. We try again to long rest. We finally get some RP in. Druid's afraid that we'll all die in here. Ranger says he won't let it happen and promises to protect her. Rogue senses the vibe and decided to hit on Druid. Druid says this isn't the time or place and wonders if we should even be talking. Rogue calls Ranger a cuck. I guess Paladin/DM took that as a sign because now a bunch of angry bugbear shock troops are trying to work their way through the Iron Gate. We get a short rest, use our potions, and it's back to combat. It's a rough fight. Our resources are worn down and the enemies just keep coming. Druid's running on cantrips and I'm out of first level spells. Without healing, damage starts to accumulate, but we finally win and push into the next chamber. We figure with the bodies we've piled and their elites dead, maybe they've abandoned the mine. No, they had not. We had to fight a literal army. We were all pretty done with it, but we had the rhythm down. We cleared room after room, and finally, near the end of the session, we find the boss room. But instead of the chieftain, it's a group of pissed off ogres. The fight's close. I get knocked into death saves, as does Ranger. But they go down, and the orc ads seem to back off. We reinforce the room and try to rest. End session. We discuss things, and Rogue is absolutely done with constant fighting. We tell Paladin as a group that we want to have politics and RP. He says he gets it, and that's that. Session 5 was brief. We wake up after a long rest and find the ogres had a loot pile with a new shiny bow for Rogue, a staff that gave more spell slots for Druid, and armor for the Ranger. We were sort of okay with this obvious bribe, since we felt we'd earned it, and we moved to leave, only for a grate to be discovered under an ogre. This wasn't the dungeon's end. Paladin/DM then smugly congratulated us on clearing layer 1 of 3, and said not to worry, the others had half as many rooms, and more interactive traps that would give RP moments. Being that this was Roll20, and we'd cleared 50-ish rooms to get this far, we respectfully declined. He insisted we didn't know how to enjoy good D&D because we hadn't faced a real boss fight yet. We figured, that's fine, but we don't care. We decided to let Rogue run the game, but we'd take our characters and stuff from this game and move to the next. DM/Paladin is salty, but he's happy he got to have a realistic dungeon crawl, even if we didn't appreciate it. So we moved from the Infinity Dungeon into the next setting. About 2 years ago, our longtime group concluded a Vampire the Masquerade campaign, and one of the players, Mike, wanted to run the next one. Started falling apart after a few months. He started acting like a complete man-child, managed to tick pretty much everything on the toxic GM checklist other than SA. 1. Shallow railroaded plots with no player agency? Check. Mike didn't have one original bone in his body, and it showed. Most of the game felt AI generated. It was riddled with cliches and mostly derivative of video games and other people's campaigns. Each plotline was simply weeks, tedious breadcrumb trails that culminated in big plot events with no actual payoff. These always boiled down to cheap shock value, edgy gore, buildings blowing up, and major NPCs getting killed off randomly because Mike thought someone needed to die for impact. This destroyed months of player agency, and there was no payoff to anything we'd be doing for over half a year. Before long, all we had were gimmicky existential threats he found in other Worlds of Darkness games, and thought they were super cool and novel. Any attempt at deviating from his imagined flow of the story was met with brute force railroading and passive aggression. 2. Arbitrary homebrews when he didn't even know the rules? Check. Mike didn't know the rules of the game he was running, and instead of learning, he decided that every player ability was broken or overpowered as soon as it was used in a way that he didn't plan for. He'd then come up with homebrews to fix them, making powers borderline useless and unusable, or making them work only when he wanted them to, for more storytelling options, i.e. easier railroading. The highlight was him reinventing the core dice rolling mechanics specifically to increase the odds of us botching rolls because, quote, players need to fail more often to make the story more interesting.
What did he say?
Oh my god, that's a wild statement. Crafting a better story makes the story more interesting. 3. GM vs players mentality, check. At session 0, we agreed we wanted collaborative storytelling and RP before rules, but Mike turned the game into the complete opposite. One day, his goal was suddenly to challenge the players, and the game became a classic case of, can you outsmart the GM? Stats didn't matter, and the GM was the sole arbiter of what was smart. Given that everyone else in the group was smarter than him, it went about as you expect. If you had an idea Mike didn't like, it just didn't work, and he'd condescendingly explain why. If you tried a brute force approach or Occam's razor, you were a problem player. You had to think of whatever contrived solution Mike came up with. Otherwise, you wouldn't get anywhere and would suffer in-game consequences for playing wrong. At one point, he pretty much told me I had to metagame and deliberately make stupid decisions so the story could happen. If your story relies on metagaming and railroading players into making stupid decisions that they don't want to make, don't think GMing is right for you. Or at least you're not ready for it yet. 4. Forcing PvP and secrecy, check. Mike eventually made his girlfriend's self-insert the protagonist, turned the game into a PvP clusterfuck because she wanted to betray us and join our enemy. Not only was he metagaming to make this work, he started deliberately giving PCs conflicting goals and pushing us to lie and work against each other. He insisted that's the way the game was supposed to be played because vampires lie and use each other. Obviously that means you have to lie to other players out of character and screw them over constantly, because everyone likes investing months into a campaign only to have their choices and payoffs flush down the toilet for the sake of brainless PvP betrayal plot twists. Session 0 be damned. 5. Targeted player abuse, check. Mike also used the game to lash out at some people, mainly his former GM and me. He started hating me because I kept finding shortcuts through his railroaded plotlines, either via plot holes he apparently didn't see or by using some basic power he didn't account for. After I killed one NPC, he presented as an unmanageable existential threat in the middle of a combat scene. He got mad. He couldn't admit he mishandled that particular situation, and it was downhill from there. He'd go out of his way to screw me over, forcing rolls, changing rules, fishing for gotchas, killing off my NPCs, etc. The most absurd example was when he decided my character status points didn't matter, because your reputation doesn't matter until you get people to trust you. Then he used those same status points to make half the setting hate me for being too successful. Couldn't make up this kind of stupid if I tried. 6. Blaming all his fuck-ups on others and ignoring feedback, check. We tried to talk things out several times, but Mike either ignored feedback or did the literal opposite of what people suggested. He took it all as a personal insult since his bloated ego couldn't accept any form of criticism. If he did something wrong and had to face it, he'd go through some sequence of the following excuses. People are overreacting, it's not a big deal. Oh, you just misunderstood my intention. Well, it was actually someone else's idea. What I did wasn't really wrong, accompanied by elaborate mental gymnastics. His final card was always to play the victim to avoid accountability, and if none of this worked, discussion would end with him throwing a tantrum, lashing out, or blaming you for not trusting him, while literally giving you all the reasons not to trust him. Ultimately, anyone who disagreed with him simply had incompatible opinions and had to go. When the game fell apart, he ended it by forcing us to play the victims in his girlfriend's self-insert power fantasy and burning bridges with friends he knew for years, but that's a horror story of its own.